Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the Kansas City Star Sports podcast presented by Underdog. We're talking Chiefs today with beat writer Jesse Newell. Jesse, on Sunday this week, we drove to St. Joseph for the first time. 2025 Chiefs training camp. Did it conjure any memories for you? Did you drive up there with a little sense of excitement, a little sense of dread, little sense of what the heck is going on with all this road construction?
Yeah, no, it's the kickoff of the season. I mean, that's the first thing. I'm sure the players feel the same way. It's what you go through to get to the meat of things, to get to games in Brazil or Monday Night Football or Sunday Night Football. There's this real mountain you have to climb, and I know that you're speaking of it from a sports journalist perspective, which is part of this, but the players for sure. I mean, last year the heat really was not that bad for St. Joe standards. Right. This year, starting off, it is going to be hot. So there is definitely a part of this where it's the training you go through to get to the good part, to get to what you want to accomplish late in the season if you're the Chiefs, and buckle up because they're going to have to go through some tough times here in St. Joseph. But I also think this is part of the advantage. If you look historically over time, the Chiefs have been great early in the season in September games. They've been better than their opponents, and you hear players reference the long drive drill on a hot day in St. Joseph for training camp, or you hear them reference that Andy Reid keeps the standard high and knows when to back off of guys in training camp, but knows when to push them. And if you're a free agent coming in here and Patrick Mahomes is signing up for this and Travis Kelce is signing up for this and Chris Jones is signing up for this, who are you to not say that you want to sign up for this, especially with as many Super Bowls that the Chiefs make and potentially win? So this is the tough part to get to the good part, and I think the buy-in has really helped the Chiefs get to where they've been to over the course of the last few years.
And for those who don't know, the Chiefs train at Missouri Western State University in St. Joseph, which is about 50 miles north, and they stay in the dormitories in Scanlon Hall. There can't be a more Spartan-like existence for an NFL team than what the Chiefs experience at training camp. And you said it. The players, the stars do it, and everybody has to go through this period. And you can't argue with the Chiefs' success on this. Look, if they had not had this kind of success, 5 Super Bowls in 6 years, 9 straight AFC championship or 9 straight AFC West Division titles, you could grumble a little louder about having to stay in dorms and practice in the heat, but you don't hear many people complaining about this outside sports writers.
The Chiefs, if you sign with the Chiefs, you sign up for this. It reminds me of last year talking to the Super Bowl with DeAndre Hopkins, because they have all the players available basically, and he had his own table, and somebody came up and said, what do you think about the Chiefs locker room in the facility? Because we know the Chiefs locker room from being there throughout the week, it's bad. They're waiting for
substandard.
They're waiting for some vicinity around here to pay for a new practice facility, to make new practice fields where they can have training camp. But until then, they're not going to pay for a new locker room when it's going to get redone or it's going to be somewhere new elsewhere. But somebody asked him, he said, hey, Chiefs locker room ranks really low. Their practice locker room ranks, the one in the stadium is very nice, but they're only in that once a week. But the locker room at the stadium ranks really low in the NFLPA rankings. What do you think of the Chiefs locker room? And DeAndre Hopkins goes, I love it. They win there. We win there, is what he said.
Good answer.
And so that's exactly what I think we're talking about here, which is my mind always goes to like Brandon Staley. The first, when he was with the Chargers the first time. What if Brandon Staley decided to stay and do his training camp in the crazy dorm rooms with cinder block walls, with these the normal dorm food that you have at the mess hall, and do all these things and decide, hey, I'm first-year coach, I'm going to do this. Everybody, Chargers, fall in line. I'm pretty sure the vets would grumble. And they'd say, what is this young cat trying to tell us to do? And what does he want it for? And why would this work? But this does work for the Chiefs because they hang the banners. And because Andy Reid has had so much success over time, that's why they consider the best coach in the NFL. So it is interesting. This does remind me a little bit of like covering KU, where the success feeds on itself, where you get freshmen coming into the program and the seniors are already there, and this is the way you win. And because of that, the standard's at a point where nobody wants to dip that. And I think the Chiefs benefit from that same thing, which is Andy Reid has the respect. He's always done it this way. And if you sign up to join the Chiefs or are drafted by the Chiefs and all the superstars buy into this, who are you to not buy into this? So I think this benefits benefits them in a lot of different ways, and I think it definitely benefits them at the beginning of the year where they're normally in better shape and they normally seem more ready to go than the team that they go against.
Yeah, I like your point about September record. I don't think that's a coincidence.
No, I don't think so either.
So, all right, and there was some news made on Sunday, a couple hours before we talked to Andy Reid. George Karlaftis signed a contract extension. We're going to get to that in a minute. I thought more interesting was news that came out a little bit earlier involving wide receiver Rashee Rice. His sentencing came out. Sentenced to 30 days in jail, 5 years probation. He can serve that jail time anytime within the 5-year probationary period. So we expect the suspension to happen soon, or at least announced soon. Let's start with what do you expect in terms of games? And now that the sentencing has been announced, has your feeling changed about perhaps the length of the suspension for Rashee Rice?
So that's the $1 million question, right? Is how many games is he going to get from the NFL's personal conduct policy violating that? Mm-hmm. The NFL has rights to basically do what they want to do in this case. Now, the player can appeal it, and the NFLPA could get involved if it's too severe, that sort of thing. But has it changed based off the sentencing? Maybe I think it's going to be a touch more severe because he is doing jail time. I wasn't sure that was going to be in the cards for this, especially with the status that he has. And sometimes we know that that law the legal part of this thing can shift based off of who your lawyer is, how many resources you have, and potentially who you are in the public. I think if I was to guess here, I don't think the NFL wants to get over its skis and do something to make a point to a particular player just because there is a union. There are guidelines normally that they follow, and there is precedent. Now, this one is completely out there. This is a different type of case, which makes it complicated in that there's a road racing incident. It's very public. It's on camera. You can see the crash happen.
Video exists.
Photos of him walking off of the highway, not tending to potential victims that were out there. So there are a lot of extenuating circumstances there. But I just think when these things happen, you always sort of want to go back to previous precedent and not completely make an example of the Chiefs or of Rashee Rice and do something that is way out of character for how you would handle these things in the past. So it's not a perfect scenario. This is nothing that's happened that's perfect. They can match up with this particular one. But I still think, the whispers that are out there and kind of how you figure this thing would go, somewhere in the 4 to 6 week range is what I would anticipate. That would be my guess for how many games he'd be out. And potentially, as you mentioned, Blair, now that the NFL, the legal process with Rashee is over, they can announce this before the season starts and have Rashee serve his time. I'm sure they would like to have that publicly happen just because it's been over a year since this incident took place. So that would be my guess with it. Again, a guess is a guess, and potentially Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, could see things a different way, but the Chiefs are going to have to be without Rashee Rice, you would think, from the beginning of the season for a significant period of time. And so that's why Andy Reid's answer on this I thought was interesting. He said that they're going to roll him in there and keep him with the same reps and keep him with the ones. And frankly, I thought he'd say the opposite. I thought he'd say, hey, we're going to ease this guy off because we need Jalen Royals to take some snaps. We need some of these other guys to make sure. Xavier Worthy, he might have to play his role from last year where he took the Rashee Rice role for a few weeks. So I was surprised by Andy Reid's answer, but I do think the Chiefs need to, make a plan for not having Rashee Rice at the beginning of the season. Something interesting as well, Blair, if you look at their schedule, at least from what we know right now, Chiefs' schedules are really front-loaded. And so this would not be the perfect timing for them when it comes to the tougher teams they play. Obviously, good timing for the playoffs. You'd anticipate him ready for then. But if you were going to pick one side or the other, the Chiefs would rather have him in the early part. It seems like that's not going to happen.
And the Chiefs don't get to negotiate when the suspension happens. It'll be, if it's announced before the season, we assume it'll be the first number of games, 4 games, 6 games, whatnot. In recent Chiefs history, there have been a couple of players suspended for violating the personal conduct policy. Charles Omenihu, before he played it down for the Chiefs, had to sit out 6 games because of a domestic violence, I believe.
With the 49ers the previous year.
Happened to the 49ers. But his start with the Chiefs was delayed by 6 games. Justin Ross, I think, was it 6 games for Justin Ross?
Yep. Same thing, domestic violence. That was an incident that happened with the Chiefs. Obviously, he's only been with the Chiefs up until this point, but that was when we covered at the Star, and he had to sit out 6 weeks for that.
So different types of offenses for those 2 players versus Rashee Rice, but what is...
Willie Gay as well. I want to throw him in there since
you.
I've been on the beat. Another domestic violence incident. But again, that's where this one is just a little bit different. It's more public with the video stuff that's out there, and potentially the public or the court of public opinion, if you will, that, seeing Rashee and seeing the speed race and seeing him walk away from it and not check on victims. But how does this, which he's lucky, we all know he's lucky that no one was killed in this. He made a very bad decision, but no one was killed in this. You are judged based off the result. How does that compare to a very, from a lot of these domestic violence incidents is a very intentional thing and something that could cause harm to people. I mean, that's the sort of thing that the commissioner's office has to gauge with this, and that's why this one's a little bit out there on its own compared to some of these other cases.
And as you said, there's jail time involved with this one.
I think that's a real thing. I honestly didn't anticipate it, to be completely honest with you. I figured at some point this thing would probably get settled, but for him to spend 30 days in jail is something. Now, that's why the NFL was waiting for the legal case to be completed, because if he spent 4 years in jail and you get a 2-game suspension from the NFL, that doesn't seem to match up. But getting 30 days in jail, now you can kind of base, hey, all the legal stuff's done, all that we need to know is out there. They can do their own investigation if they want. I'm sure they have been over the course of the last year. But now you can at least have full information available when you're going for your punishment, and that's the situation the NFL's in now.
He seems to have said all the right things. I know it's through his attorney, but if there's the way to have good behavior in the aftermath of this, he's displayed it, has apologized and kind of thrown himself on the mercy of public opinion. I don't know if that's going to make any difference in terms of the punishment that the NFL provides here.
I think it could, compared if he did it the other way and showed no contrition.
Yeah.
And I think, Blair, this is where it gets a little complicated, too, because to your point, I remember talking to him at his football camp.
Right. You were the first one to talk to him.
Yeah, we had a couple of TV stations out there, but we were the only newspaper outlet that was out there for that. And even then, he spoke to it and said he made mistakes. And I mean, that was him without a lawyer around. That was him, speaking for himself. I do feel compelled to mention, we had the story in the Star last week that I contacted the lawyer in one of his civil cases, Rashee Rice, and they came to an agreement in April that he would pay back $1 million to this lawyer's client who was involved in this wreck. And the agreement was a non-disclosure non-disclosure for both Rashee and the Chiefs. Both parties agreed to it. And the terms of it were that Rashee Rice paid $500,000 immediately and then $500,000 30 days later. And the lawyer said he was alerted basically the day before that Rashee was not going to pay. And this thing comes at 7.5% interest, so that money will compile. In Texas state law, it only compiles every year and not every month. So in a year, it'll be $1,075,000, and then in 2 years it would be that. But when we talk about feeling bad for your actions and coming forward, I do think the NFL could look at this because there was an agreement in place for him to potentially make one of these victims whole. And in speaking to the attorney of this victim, basically saying, look, there's a very real case that Rashee Rice, his CPA could be telling him, this is a really affordable loan for you to take. You don't have to pay this thing. And in a year, you could have a long-term extension from somebody. And then you'll have $50 million, $60 million, $70 million, and you can easily pay this thing off. But is that the right thing to do as a human and for the damage you've caused? And are your words matching your actions here? Or are you just trying to get your punishment lessened? Because, if you wanted your words to match your actions, you potentially would go out there and say, I need a loan. I need a loan for $1 million. I agree to pay it off here in a year, but this person needs to be made whole, and I need to follow through on all these things I've said. So I don't know where that falls in the NFL landscape of things. If they say, hey, we appreciate your words here, but some of these victims you said you take care of, you haven't done so yet, and potentially are making a financial decision rather than a human decision on this. But I do think it is smart of him to handle this the way he has publicly with the statements he's made and what he's said, because to come out and own responsibility for your actions, to do things to try to make it right, I do think the NFL will view that in a better light. Now it'll be up to them to determine whether everything is being done to make these victims whole, and if Rashee Rice is coming through on his side of the bargain when it comes to reimbursing these people that he said he would reimburse.
No missteps allowed for Rashee Rice.
And that's the serious part here. I'm glad you brought that up, because the question becomes, for the Chiefs, if you're signing him long term, this 5-year probation, if he violates it, I mean, there's not going to be much leniency. Like, this is serious stuff. So if you are locking yourself in the Chiefs, and you know that if he has one legal, I mean, it could be a lot of things that could happen. You know, a DUI, domestic violence, whatever the case may be, anything like that could trigger something, and all of a sudden you violate your probation. The Dallas County is not going to look very highly on that, especially after the deal that they struck with him. So that has to factor into the next negotiation. If the Chiefs on the field, the Chiefs have loved what Rashee Rice does and what he provides for them and the production he's had, and they think so highly of him on the field and what he does after the catch. But this negotiation is interesting. If you're the Chiefs, you have to have great trust in what he does, or give yourself some out in the contract to make sure that you're covered in case something legally that happens doesn't put him into jail for an extended period of time. So that will be something to definitely track here as the Chiefs potentially try to lock him up long term, is what concessions do both sides have to make to get that sort of thing done.
You mentioned it a moment ago. What about the ramifications on the roster? If he doesn't start the season with the Chiefs, some wide receiver, I assume it's going to be an additional wide receiver who might not have made the team coming out of camp, will make the team. And everyone, let's assume Rashee Rice would be the number one guy. Everybody just moves up a slot, right? Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, Jalen Royals. Who's behind Jalen Royals in that scenario?
Yeah, so part of this I will have to say that is more tight ends. The Chiefs, Andy Reid loves those tight ends already, and you have, we know Travis Kelce at his advanced football age, you can't expect the production to continue like he does, but between him and Noah Gray, that's two pretty good guys to rely upon to throw your two tight end personnel on the field. You're right, though. I sometimes see online, and it frustrates me a little bit, or it would frustrate me if it was Brett Veach and I was reading these sorts of things as the Chiefs GM, which is like, why isn't Sky Moore gone yet? Why haven't they just cut him, And this is the answer. If you have a resource and you have somebody on your roster who's been with you and done the right things, you don't just release resources that you have, because you don't know what you're going to need. And so if the Chiefs had just said, hey, Sky, get out of here in March because we just don't like you and don't think you fit in anymore, and then this thing happens, all of a sudden you've lost depth for no real reason to do that. So, yes, other guys step up. I can't remember if you mentioned Juju Smith-Schuster, but he plays a vital role for the Chiefs. He's a good blocker, good team player, does the rub routes, does all those things correctly, has lost a step, physically. He's getting an advanced age for Juju years because he started football so young in the NFL at age 20. But, the end of that roster is already going to be position battles. But right now, Tyquan Thornton, Sky Moore, Jason Brownlee's another guy they brought in that has had some good moments. Justin Ross just asked for his release, so he's no longer in that sort of mix. Nico Remigio is another one if they want him for special teams, more of a returner than a receiver. But that opens up potentially a spot to start the year, you would think, for the Chiefs to add another receiver to the mix. Now, if Sam McDowell, our colleague, was sitting here, he would tell you the Chiefs always take too many receivers and that Andy Reid's offenses never rely on a fifth and a sixth guy. And he's right, because the numbers back him up on that. But at the same point, the Chiefs also could have injuries and they could have other things go awry. And it seems like every year I've covered the Chiefs, there's been some sort of receiver injury that happens during training camp. Last year was Hollywood Brown. A couple years ago was Kadarius Toney. So you keep depth when you can. And so this is where, a Sky Moore, a Tyquan Thornton, it becomes big for you because you have to fill in for that position. And now the Chiefs at least have some guys that they feel good about that have been in the system and potentially can step in and fill that gap when and how long Rashee Rice ends up being out.
Take a swing at picking sports this baseball season with Underdog. Playing on their app is as easy as choosing higher or lower on players' stats. Get them right, and you could win up to 1,000 times your money. Sign up today using promo code KCSTAR to get a gimme pick as a part of your first cash entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus credits when you deposit. Must be 18 plus and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org.
We're back on SportsBeat KC, presented by Underdog. I'm here with Chiefs beat writer Jesse Newell, and the Chiefs made some signing news this past week. George Karlaftis inks a 4-year deal worth $93 million, and the Chiefs didn't have to sign him. Why did they do it?
Yeah, I thought Sam, speaking of Sam, we mentioned him earlier, wrote a good column about this today. To your point, Blair, the Chiefs had George Karlaftis in the last year of his 4th-year rookie deal this year. They had already signed him to, or agreed to, his 5th-year option since he's a first-round pick. So they had him locked in for 2026 at a set salary. So the new extension is 4 years past that. So, I mean, they're locking him up for 6 years, essentially.
Yes.
He is locked in. And I think the order of this is interesting because you figured they would go Trent McDuffie first based off of what McDuffie has been for the Chiefs. So for George Karlaftis to sign it this early, it does sort of raise your eyebrow and go, wow, I think that this is maybe out of order when it comes to that. But the motivations for the Chiefs to do this, I think there's a couple very clear things. If we know anything about Brett Veach, he loves young players. And George Karlaftis has been a staple for them, a steady player for them, has played so many snaps. He can handle the run, he can set the edge, and then he provides the pass rush juice. But more than that, he stepped in at age 21 and did that as a rookie, a first-round pick. I looked it up. He's entering his 4th season. He's 24 years old, super young for the position. Darius Alexander, who I know was mocked to some Chiefs we do with the mock drafts, Blair, just got taken in the 3rd round by the New York Giants as a defensive end. He's 8 months older than George Karlaftis. Just got drafted. So, I mean, that kind of solidifies it for you. It's like, wow, you've got this guy's productive. He's been a staple for you. He's been a reliable contributor. And he's 8 months younger than a dude that just got drafted in the last draft. It's telling you maybe, Karlaftis could be an ascending player. And that's the second thing I would say to you. And Sam did a good job of mentioning this in the column as well. I wrote a story in January about the next gen stats and some of the numbers that really showed that Karlaftis was taken off at the end of last year, especially on a stat called pass rush get off, which is how quickly you get across the line of scrimmage. It makes sense. Why? How can you be a good pass rusher? You beat the tackle to the spot and you get by him and you get to the quarterback. And Karlaftis' numbers took off at the end of last year. I talked to him in the locker room. He really didn't have a great explanation why. We know he's a hard worker. He works with Tom Ali for his hand stuff, and he's continually working in the weight room and all those things. But his pressure rate last year at the end of the season really took off. He still only had 8.5 regular season sacks. This could be a moment where the Chiefs are sort of getting an emerging player before his raw stats have caught up to the production he had. And if they get that same player they had for the last few weeks at the beginning of this season, and he continues that ascent, they could have got a steal here because they probably might have locked in a guy before his full value was shown in some of those stats like sacks that we all sort of have embraced. So not only that, I mean, the numbers are out there. I mean, they can look like big numbers when it comes to 22 or 23 million a year. But, think about this, Blair, like the salary cap goes up every single year. And we're talking about an extension that starts in 2 years from now. So what is 23 million going to be in 2029 and 2028? All of a sudden, if he continues being a top 15 to 20 pass rusher, you're absolutely getting your value at a premium position at edge rusher. If George Karlaftis is and ages like you think he's going to age, and the salary cap continues to go up like you think it's going to go up. So this seems like the type of deal that the Chiefs probably couldn't turn down, because it seems from those numbers that Karlaftis wanted to be in Kansas City. He wanted the security, and he was fine giving up a little bit, wondering or seeing how he was going to perform the next couple of years. And the Chiefs on their end said, look, the numbers might be really, really good for this guy next year. We see some underlying things that make us think he could be elite. Might as well lock him in now. And if you lock him in now, you potentially get yourself a real steal down the line if he ends up being the player that potentially he could be based off of some of those numbers we've been talking about.
And that ascending trend of last year included the playoffs. He
Yes,
had
it
some
did.
great playoff games.
The Texans game, he was
the
unbelievable.
best player on the field for the Chiefs that day was George Karlaftis against the Texans in the divisional round game.
And it's a premium position. It's funny talking about this, but some of these other positions the Chiefs have signed recently, the long-term extensions, are not bad. I mean, they signed Creed Humphrey, and we all consider him the best center in the NFL. So do NFL executives, but still a center. Sometimes teams can get away with having not great centers and still be good. Trey Smith's the right guard. The Chiefs broke the bank and set a new record for right guard. Sometimes teams can get by. I mean, the Chiefs are an example. Nick Allegretti steps in a Super Bowl, and they're okay. They did all fine with Mahomes back there, but they do that. Edge rusher is one of those. We talk so much, Blair, about offensive line is a weak link system. 4 guys can do their job. 1 guy doesn't. That 1 guy can screw up the play. So on the opposite end, defensive line could be a strong link system. Like, the Chiefs' other guys can get dominated on that play. If George Karlaftis beats his man, the play is over with. It's busted. And so that's why those players are so valuable. And so if Karlaftis ages the way that potentially he could age based off of what we've seen from him so far, this could end up being a really good deal for the Chiefs.
Okay, and you touched on it a while ago. What does this possibly mean for Trent McDuffie, who is actually, also a first-round pick the same year as Karlaftis, and is seen as better at his position than Karlaftis is at his? Trent McDuffie has an all-pro season on his resume. Karlaftis, not even a Pro Bowl. So what's the future for Trent McDuffie?
Yeah, 2 All-Pros, I think. Second team on one and
first team on the other.
But hasn't done the Pro Bowl, which cost him.
It's crazy.
It's very interesting. So I talk about weak link system. Another weak link system along with offensive line is secondary. And the Chiefs saw this last year, which is you can have elite players out there, but what do NFL offenses do? They pick on the weak guy. And so we saw times, especially in the Super Bowl, where the Chiefs could have good coverage elsewhere, but if you don't have 4 to 5 guys who are good at covering or average at covering, it doesn't matter if Trent McDuffie's locking his guy down. It matters that somebody else out there was not locking their guy down. So this becomes a little bit more complicated for the Chiefs. In terms of youth, McDuffie has it. Face of the program, McDuffie has it. Great in front of cameras, out in public. McDuffie, check every box. I mean, these are the types of guys that the Chiefs are signing right now. Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith. These guys have all those things, and he would fit into that box.
Say Nick Bolton, part of that as well.
Nick Bolton, great call, Blair. Absolutely. It completely fits in that, and that's why they've sort of fallen in love with their own guys when they re-sign them, because they know what they mean here, and they understand the type of football players, and then especially people that they are as well. McDuffie checks all those boxes. It's just... For one, I know we've discussed this recently, but how many positions can the Chiefs play top of market to at a certain point? I mean, right now they're at quarterback, tight end, center, right guard. Right tackle is the second highest on the cap coming up this season in Juwan Taylor. Defensive tackle, Chris Jones. Nick Bolton is third, I think, when it comes to linebacker. And now Karlaftis is top 10 in terms of deal. I mean, that's not as big as the other ones, but and then kicker with Bucker. I mean, at a certain point, you would figure that even with all the salary cap dancing you can do, the Chiefs are going to make a tough decision, like they did with Tyreek Hill a few years back, and they pick at the end of every NFL draft round. And the reason they have Trent McDuffie is because they traded Tyreek Hill, and they made a tough decision. So I know this. If the Chiefs put him on the market, and they got him the 5th-year option, which they already signed up for, but they traded him and let other team pay that extension, they get a lot of draft resources. That's an option. I don't think it's their preferred option. I think they love what McDuffie has done for them. But there comes a certain point where you say, is it time for the Chiefs to kind of redo the Tyreek Hill trade and to get those draft resources and to make a tough decision on a player that you like? Because there should come a certain moment where you cannot sign every single player that you have. So this will be an interesting one. I guess if you ask me right now, I would still think the way the Chiefs have trended lately, that they are just taking care of their own guys, that they'll find some sort of way to get McDuffie done. But I could definitely see both sides of it. And that's as somebody who is probably as big of a McDuffie fan as anybody out there based off what he's done for the Chiefs and what he's meant to them off the field. And I'm sure he's going to step into a leadership role this year. The other question we got to ask, how many times have the Chiefs given a secondary player a long-term extension?
Not many.
They paid up for L'Jarius, remember, but that was a short-term deal, and then ended up trading him. Shavarius Ward walked. Marcus Peters they walked away from very early. I know that was a previous regime, but this has been a coaching staff that has been able to find diamonds in the rough and develop guys in that way, and a lot of that's been Steve Spagnuolo with his history of cornerbacks, and Dave Merritt, who's secondary coach, is obviously well-respected. So if the Chiefs have this Moneyball thing going, if they can continue to take undrafted free agents and 4th-round picks and 3rd-round picks and 7th-round picks and cobble it together and come up with, like we talked about, 5 good corners where it's tough to pick on somebody, maybe they continue that trend and say you get the resources from that trade elsewhere and start to rebuild yourself up again. Is that the preferred option? Probably not, but there comes a certain point where you have to make a tough decision. And at this point, Trent McDuffie remains the one guy who they could make a difficult decision and get a heck of a lot of resources back.
And we mentioned Trey Smith a couple of times. 4 years, $94 million, with $70 million of that guaranteed, makes him the highest paid guard in NFL history. That'll change, of course.
A couple years.
Yeah, a couple years. But it's a great story. Whether, whatever you think of him as a player, and he's a Pro Bowl player. He's also a 6th-round draft pick who teams shied away from because of the blood clots in his lungs and missed a lot of a big chunk of one of his years at Tennessee. Chiefs took a chance on him and have been rewarded with his great play, and now he has been rewarded with a big contract. So he's just one of those guys you feel good for.
It stood out to when Andy Reid was asked about him in our first day going to training camp that he immediately, Andy Reid's not the sappy type really, but he immediately started with what a story. This kid, what a story to have a 6th-round pick, go through all he went through medically, and to be able to sign this deal and take care of his family for generations. So you do feel good for him. Again, Trey Smith, great locker room guy, great guy to talk to. Leadership, all those things. It is fascinating how they did this because the Chiefs had a choice. They could have taken Joe Thuney and kept him and given him a couple years extension and moved on from Trey Smith. And instead they stuck with Trey Smith. We know that they love the younger players. The other thing that kind of always circles back in my mind too a little bit is if you're going to compare Thuney and Trey Smith, Thuney's a better pass blocker, Trey Smith is a better run blocker. There's at least part of this to me that makes me think we don't talk about it maybe enough, but the Chiefs have to get back to some running the football. They're going to have to take some pressure off of Mahomes. We know last year through the first half of the season, kind of strangely, they were winning games by running the football, which hadn't really been their MO, but Trey Smith's a mauler. I mean, he goes out there and he'll run you over and then pancake back on top of you, and sometimes in the pass game, he can be God. I mean, I'm sure they're expecting development from him, more development. He's obviously a hard worker, but the Super Bowl wasn't his best game against the Eagles. So there's part of this too, from a philosophy standpoint for the Chiefs, is to say there needs to be run game involved. If you're locking up Creed Humphrey and you're locking up Trey Smith and you've got the team that you have now and you move on from Joe Thuney, this can't just be a 90-10 pass run. What we know it's not that already, but you know what I'm saying. This, there's going to have to be part of this that Trey Smith, the load he's taking is clearing holes in the run game to take pressure off the rest of the offense. And that's a choice the Chiefs made by taking him over Joe Thuney or choosing to keep him over Joe Thuney. So we'll see how he develops over time. You mentioned it. It's a really good story, and obviously the Chiefs are very happy with what they've done for him so far. But to live up to that contract, he's going to have to continue to ascend and be the player he's been, and even maybe more so when it comes to the pass game. And so we'll see how this develops for the Chiefs, and this ends up being a contract that they are just fine with looking back on instead of one where they look back and say, maybe there could have been a different scenario that could have taken place there.
We're on the eve of the first full week of training camp. What's just one thing you're going to be paying close attention to in week 1 in St. Joseph?
Yeah, they start with passing camp, so you have to kind of go to something there. But I think the receivers, I think it's something that we're going to be watching for. I mean, a guy gets a little early lead. I mean, I was really impressed over the summer by Tyquan Thornton. I think he's their type. Yes. He's quick in short bursts. He's a former 2nd-round draft pick. The Chiefs love the speed to see what he does. And then, obviously, left tackle. I mean, I know you asked me for one, but left tackle. How do they handle this with Juwan Taylor out to start the season on PUP? Who's at right tackle? And how much do they rotate? And
is it Wanye?
How much do you want to rotate? Do you want to put Jalen Moore over at right tackle if he's competing for left tackle? Do you want to move Josh Simmons off left tackle ever if you think that he's the left tackle of the future? So that's kind of fascinating to me as well. We'll see how all that plays out, but there's definitely a battle at the receiver room, and so seeing how those back-end guys perform will be something to watch throughout camp.
All right, always great talking Chiefs with beat writer Jesse Newell. And, hey, thanks for listening to SportsBeat KC, presented by Underdog. Big thanks to our producers, Randy Mason and Monty Davis, to our editors, Jeff Rosen and Scott Chasen. I'm Blair Kirchhoff, and we'll talk sports in Kansas City again soon.